This is the Angry Birds Bird Minute, sponsored by Angry Birds for their 15th anniversary, where we tell you all about a cool bird that may or may not be angry. This week's bird is the Andean condor. The Andean condor is the world's largest bird of prey. Found throughout the Andes Mountains in South America, this soaring scavenger can grow to weigh 33 pounds and has a wingspan over 10 feet. Their nests are usually found in cliffs over 16,000 feet in elevation, and they typically lay 1 to 2 eggs at a time. Andean condors are some of the world's longest-lived birds as well, with a lifespan of over 70 years in the wild. They prefer to scavenge from already deceased deer and cattle, but they'll eat a wide variety of carrion. And those on the coast are even known to feed largely on beached whales and other marine mammals. But are they angry? On a scale from 1 to angry, we rate the Andean condor as soaring above the fray. This is Wild Green Streams. I'm Rhett.
I'm Curtis.
I'm Io.
And with us today are Cy Montgomery and Warren Carlyle. Cy and Warren, do you want to introduce yourselves?
I'm an author. Latest book is Secrets of the Octopus, which I did with Warren.
Yep, I'm Warren Carlyle. I run Octonation, the largest octopus fan club. I always tell people I'm the PR agent for the octopus. And so anytime somebody whispers octopus, I hear about it.
Before we were recording, Warren, you were talking about how people ask you why you don't scuba dive all the time and stuff, and you said you're too busy. The thing I thought of was Tom Hanks's agent isn't on set all day long.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much stuff to do. And what people don't realize, kind of like with Octonation, is we have so many special interests in Octonation, from underwater photographers to tattoo artists to researchers to academics. There's all of this stuff going on, and I'm sort of like the liaison between all of them, and so I'm kept very busy.
And then Cy, you've written dozens of books. What led you to octopuses specifically?
I had written maybe 30 of my books in 2011, and most of them were about terrestrial vertebrates like ourselves. They were about tree kangaroos and snow leopards and apes and birds and so on and so forth. But most animal lives are actually living in the sea, and they are not vertebrates, they're invertebrates. So I thought, what kind of a naturalist am I? And also, for the longest time, I have felt that other animals think, feel, and know, and I've written about this. But I wanted to write about the issue of consciousness, the philosophical hard question of consciousness. And I thought, who better to be my guide to this than an octopus, a marine invertebrate who folks believe is very intelligent. So in March of 2011, I set out to meet an octopus whose name was Athena at New England Aquarium. And this changed my life and resulted in a book that was a surprise international bestseller, put me in touch with Warren, who is my soulmate, and led to this book that just came out, Secrets of the Octopus, which is the companion book to a TV series that National Geographic will be airing on Earth Day. So octopuses have really, really blessed me.
And what is it about them that drew you in? I mean, as an octopus fan, I understand how could you not be drawn in, but what was it for you that was like, this is something really special?
Well, I'd always felt when I've gone to the aquarium that you look into the eyes of an octopus and someone is looking back at you with a cognizant gaze. But when I first met Athena, my first octopus, I knew here was a creature that was just as curious about me as I was about her. I had no expectations when Scott Dowd, my now dear friend, lifted the lid on Athena's tank. But what I saw was this brilliant animal who was actually pretty large, 40 pounds, 4-foot long arms, each arm of which, of course, there were 8. She peered at me from her lair, looked right into my face, turned bright red with excitement, and then flowed out of her den like a silk scarf in the water and floated up to meet me. And her white suckers were reaching toward me. So I plunged my hands and arms into the water, of course, as one does, to meet the octopus. And my skin was covered with these soft, questing suckers that were feeling me and tasting me at the same time. And I was captivated. I needed to know this beautiful creature. And that set me on a love affair that has lasted to this day.
That's super cool.
I could just listen to Sai talk for hours about the octopus. I mean, I feel like that's really what, when I first picked up her book and I started reading this, I was like, finally, somebody's talking about my favorite animal in a way that this animal's so deserving of. I had read in field guides. I remember when I was 7 and I saw an octopus for the first time at an aquarium, and I looked in the eyes and had that same sort of feeling. And I have 2 German Shepherds now, and for anybody that has animals, it's kind of like they kind of tell you, hey, you can kind of look at them, and you're like, oh, you're hungry. Oh, you need to go outside. Oh, they train you very well. And it's that same sort of feeling. It's like you can't really explain it until you look. You're like, there's something going on there. I'm not too sure. And the more time you spend, the more you can kind of like, I don't know, feel like you can tell what somebody needs. Being a neurodivergent kid, I'm autistic, I have ADHD. I made flashcards for everything. And I remember going to the library, thinking that I was going to make flashcards for the octopus. And I got to, I think, giant Pacific octopus, they're like common octopus. And I was like, where are all the other ones? Like there must be more. And I couldn't find any books really for me. And for those of you who are autistic or know somebody who is, when we have an open loop with something, it's like nails on a chalkboard. It's like we need to figure out what's going on here. And so I went to the bigger library, found a little bit more, but I was like, why doesn't this animal that's been on this planet for hundreds of millions of years have more? It just didn't make any sense to me. And it wasn't until 2015 that I read Sai's book, and she's like, you're probably wondering why there isn't more fanfare, and it's because they've been misrepresented. They've been seen as monsters. Western culture has just really demonized them. There's just a lot of what they do that just like freaks people out. And I was like, well, that's not. And so when I read Sai's words, I was like, we need to take this kind of languaging and this wonder and move it into this digital environment. And so that's what I set out to do. And I let Sai know. And I was just like, I want to do this, but I have no background. I have no marine biology background. I was a classical saxophone performance major. There was no reason in the world why I should have head this up. And she said, I remember she called me an Octo King. And I was like, well, if I've been dubbed by Sai Montgomery, that's kind of like literally all of the validation that I need to start something. And I started and just have been profiling different species all over the world and connecting with people all over the world to create this science communication project that's turned into what it is today.
You've really created an amazing community. I think it's the tagline for it is the world's largest octopus fan club. And I think it might be the world's largest animal fan club. Like, I don't think I've seen, like the world's largest tapir fan club or something like that out there. It's a pretty crazy and cool project.
Such a variety within the group. You'll have pen and ink illustrations and tattoos and sculpture and underwater photography and videography and marine science and cartoonists and memes and like you're making plush of lesser celebrated species and stickers and like it's just if it's octopus, it's there.
Yeah. And I remember when I first, because I've always been a very strategic sort of person. That's the way my mind works. I remember when I first started, I was like, okay, I need to reverse engineer the attention span of somebody who self-identifies as being interested in the octopus. Where are they currently being met? Who is providing them resources? Where are all these places? And I found that there were so many places and they all had conflicting kind of ideologies. And I had to find, and that's why you'll see with us, we had to establish very clear morals and guidelines in the beginning, because I was a highly sensitive kid. And anytime I saw a creature being harmed in any way, I broke down, being like very nihilistic. Why does the world even exist? All this crazy stuff. And so I had to put myself into a place where like I wanted to establish wonder of the ocean by educating the world about octopuses. So I was like, that's what we're going to do here. There's plenty of work to be done in the ocean literacy space that I want to just do that. And the animal rights people can do the animal rights thing. The conservationists can do the conservation thing.
Mhm.
I feel like there's a lot of work to establish baseline literacy and wonder for the ocean so that people know what's at stake. And that's where I find joy. So that's what I've kind of done.
And I think that's one of my favorite things to do is to introduce, to help share that joy because there's so many cool things and animals on this planet. And I'm like, it's so cool, but so people just like haven't encountered them. And I'm like, I am so excited that I get to share this with you, that you can also share in this excitement. And it's also really cool because for creating this such a large group for an animal that for so long was really misunderstood and like there's not a lot of information about them. Like in some of the octo profiles in the book, like one of the species, we don't know what its lifespan is. Like there's so much we still don't know. And yet all these people have come together to celebrate how much they like it. So it helps to find that community of something where that was demonized for all these years is now being celebrated and shared. And that community is really cool. And that like kindred spirit to find amongst people from across the world is just like super cool.
I totally get what you're getting at, Warren, with like being a kid. Octopus are my favorite animals as well. And just being a kid and being like, there isn't enough. Pre-internet, it was like this void of octopus content. I had this one book, I don't even remember how I got it, called Tentacles, and it was just about all the different cephalopods. And I poured through that. And like I remember watching Sesame Street and there being like a 0.5 second clip of an octopus on like one of the
I remember
VHS
that.
songs, We Are All Earthlings. I would like rewind that just to see that 5 seconds of an octopus, or like watching Little Mermaid and a squid appears on screen during the Kiss the
Yeah.
Girl sequence and just being like pausing it in that moment because I'm like, there's a squid, like there's a cephalopod, but like pre-internet and just having these moments of, and then eventually finding people online, offline who are like, you get it. These things are fascinating. They're so cool. It's so cool to find that community.
There was a meme that I saw a while back. The caption of the meme, it had a bunch of different scientific article headlines about octopuses. They have attention spans, they change colors, they do all these things. And it said every single time there's a study about an octopus, it's completely insane. There's never like a ho-hum kind of sounding thing about them.
Yes, I can speak to this because I always tell people that she has the ability to make people fall in love with an animal that they've never even considered or that they're just now learning about for the first time. And so maybe you can speak to that, Sai. Like, how do you work through that process of inspiring wonder? Because I know that for me, when I read your book, I was just like, this is what's missing. And even hearing you talk, like I said, I could hear you talk for 2 or 3 hours about anything. I'm curious how you develop that.
Well, I think I have always known, as have you, and I expect listeners and everyone here tonight, that animals are individuals, that they think and they feel and they know. And what we connect with often is an individual. So that's why I wanted to get to know Athena. Unfortunately, Athena, being a giant Pacific octopus, they only live 3 to 5 years. And by the time you see an octopus in the aquarium, they're already a year old or more because they hatch out and they're the size of a grain of rice. She died all too quickly before I could get to know her, but I met her successor, Octavia, and really got to know her. Every single week I went in and spent time with her. And she recognized me. I have zero doubt of that.
Mm-hmm.
We also know from scientific experiments that octopuses do recognize individual people. They've done experiments with volunteers who were absolutely dressed identically and tested whether the octopus recognized your face just looking up through the water at you, which I think is amazing considering our faces look so unlike their faces.
Yeah.
Our mouths, for example, are not in our armpits. The first thing that you see on an octopus, that top thing, isn't their head. And yet they know our faces and they recognize us. So I let the octopuses reveal their personalities or octonalities to me. And they were so appealing. Each animal was so individual, so appealing, so smart. And I went at this with beginner's mind. I didn't know what to expect. Of course, Warren was talking about, you know your dog, you look at the position of their ears and their lips and their eyebrows and their tails, and there's so many signals we know how to read. I didn't know that I'd be able to read the signals of an octopus, of a marine invertebrate who was separated from us by this yawning chasm, the great vertebral divide. The last time we shared a common ancestor with an octopus was 500 million years ago, and everybody was a tube. So, you know, someone like that, can you be friends with someone like that? And yes, you can. And I think that that is what allowed people to connect to a cold, slimy marine invertebrate who tastes with all of its skin and is a venomous animal, which is off-putting to some people. I found when I went to the aquarium, I liked to listen to what some of the aquarium goers would say on the public side. And there was a group of young teenage girls who went passed by my friend Octavia's exhibit. And I loved Octavia. I knew her very well. And at that point, she'd laid eggs and she was guarding her eggs. And one of the girls went, "Ew, I bet it's slimy." And all the girls were going like, "Ew, gross octopus." And I said, "But you know what? This one's a mom. Those are her eggs. Look at those things. Those are her eggs. And she is guarding them so carefully that she's not going to leave them even to eat." And in the wild, they don't get anything to eat at all for like 6 months. And the last thing they do with their last breath, quite literally, is often to blow the power larvae, the hatching babies, out of their lair. And all of a sudden, these girls who were going, "Ew," their eyes started to glaze with tears. And they were like, "Oh," and they wanted to know more. Well, then I started telling them more things, some of which is how different they are from us, but they wanted to hear how similar we are. And that's how you reach across a divide of 500 million years of evolution.
It's amazing how just the smallest bit of knowledge can close that gap sometimes.
Yeah.
Every single time I write too, even because I've written thousands and thousands of posts to date, and I ask myself the same questions that when I read The Soul of an Octopus, there's like this sort of like moral code that I have when I'm reading my writing. And I go, does this give the ability to somebody to feel empowered to go up to somebody who they don't know and be like, "Hey, I learned this today. I'm really excited about this." Like when I taught that octopus suckers, they have this lining similar to how we have fingernails. And when they want to clean themselves or improve their sense of smell or their grip on objects, they kind of like take themselves to a spa and they give themselves a manicure. They'll kind of like twirl their arms and it'll slough off that outer layer of skin. And then they have this new glowing white sucker, which can taste better and can improve its grip on objects. And so I feel really confident that by me educating like that, somebody will go to their friend and be like, "Did you know that they can give themselves manicures? Or did you know that, I didn't even know an octopus could taste with its sucker until I learned that the reason why they're doing this action, turning on self-cleaning mode, essentially, is for a reason." And so every single time I write, I think about that. I'm thinking, am I empowering somebody to go out there, to be excited, to be like, "I cannot wait to tell the next person this." And I think that for the past 9 years of doing that, I've gotten better and better. And that's in the book, Secrets of an Octopus, with the 16 species profiles. I thought about that. I wanted to make it even more enchanting. I kind of got reined in a little bit, but it's pretty close.
Well, they love your stuff. And gosh, I mean, I made him read from the hairy octopus entry on one of the recent Zooms that we did. And it was wild just watching the jaw drop on our host as he listened to some of this. Oh my God. I mean, people don't even know that there is a hairy octopus.
The blanket octopus right now is the one that because I think it's with the cool thing about ADHD and octopus is that they're literally endlessly fascinating. There's always something new that's coming out. And so for whatever reason, I've had all of these peaks and valleys with interest my whole entire life. And with octopuses, it's just, there's always something coming out. There's always something new. And so with the blanket octopus, when I learned about her, that she spends her whole entire life floating through the open ocean. And it's almost like these males, they're like little sperm bubbles, essentially. Their whole entire life is dedicated to growing their hectocotylus, and they're like the size of like little popcorn. And they like ride the bells of jellyfish to protect themselves so they don't get eaten. And they'll find themselves this big flowing female that has this 6 foot long iridescent cape. And then when it's time to like mate, he'll go up and, release his hectocotylus, and it'll find its way in her mantle, and she'll keep them there. But then she just sprouts these biological stalks out of her body, like Jack and the Beanstalk. And it's like this like calcium carbonate like stalks. And it's like, how did this happen? Like how, hundreds of millions of years of really figuring it out. And I just feel like the fact that they're just masters of their environment, no matter where they live in the ocean, and that we're discovering at every depth, at every climate, at every whatever, that there's a species there and it's just figured it out. I feel like, I remember when I started Octonation, my brother said, shouldn't you choose an animal that's going extinct? And I told him, and I was like, no, that's what's wrong, is that there's so many foundations that are just focused on things that are going away. And I'm just like, why don't we focus on an animal that has survived mass extinctive events and is still thriving? There's no threat of extinction. I feel like that's something that we should also be enamored by. And I was like, I think I can do that. And he was like, I think you should choose something that's going extinct.
And look at you now.
Look where you are now.
Yeah.
I think the doom and gloom niche, that narrative is important, and it's good that it exists in some ways, but I think that niche is full. I think that there's a lot of media about that, and I think everyone on Earth almost has been reached by that message. So I think there's room for some positivity and for some wonder in the world too. It doesn't have to all be about whatever the most threatened thing is in this given moment.
The Sarah McLachlan commercial, like In the Arms of an Angel, with dogs in cages and stuff. I mean, I can't get all of this media out of my head because it traumatized me as a kid. Just being like, this is not the vibe. Like, this isn't working for me. This is not making me want to feel like there's hope. This is honestly doing the opposite. And I understand that some people are fired up by that and they're lit up by anger. Yeah. But for Octonation, we believe that anger isn't a sustainable emotion. It needs to be solidified or anchored to some literacy, some ocean, or else when you tell people why you care about things, you're just like, because with like, I don't know, the turtle and the straw in its nose or whatever, it gets to a point where it's just like, okay, but what's at stake? We need to teach more. They need to have more, I don't know, information.
Yeah. We're definitely on the same page with Wild Green Memes and Wild Green Future, where it's like, you need to inspire that love, that wonder, that captivation for them to care in the first place that certain aspects of the world are imperiled. You want to start the conversation with the wow factor. And then from there, people start to care about something from there, people start to care about things,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Warren's been so successful at this. Octonation, I mean, people are floored first when they learn that 500 million people viewed content on Octonation online. 500 million.
It was educational content. Like, you know what I mean? It's like purely education. And I remember people told me for the longest time, no one's reading your captions. Like, that's just not happening, because I max out my captions.
Oh, sure.
I mean, I write a lot. And I do it, it's meditative almost for me, but I know that it's making a difference, because what we've seen, since Soul of an Octopus come out, and Cy mentions this in Secrets of the Octopus in the first couple pages, there were really no octopus. There wasn't really merch. There wasn't like all this stuff. And now it's like you can't look left or right without seeing something, art. And I think we've also, created that market for, like, when it comes to underwater photographers. The more that we can get the word out there, the more their footage gets licensed, the more that they can spend their life taking more photos of octopuses. With artists, the more people buy octopus art, the more they can spend their life creating, and having a career. And I'm glad, and I always wanted to be. I'm the middle of 7 children, so like that middle child syndrome of like wanting to showcase my brothers and sisters all the time. And that's just kind of how I view my like Octonation is kind of like my family. I want to put people on and hold spotlights to them and be like, look at what Chelsea Bennis is doing, a researcher out at Florida Atlantic University. Look at what, Kurt Onthank is doing with the smooth skin octopus. Like, look at what Magnus Lundgren, his photographs in Indonesia of the blanket octopus. There's just so many unique individuals that are deserving to be seen in our community. And it's like, we can do that now because we own the platform.
And you have made such a difference. One of the things that struck me was when I started working on octopus in 2011, was there were people who had been laboring away for decades and doing amazing stuff, but no one heard about it. And for example, Chrissy Hufford, she discovered that there were octopuses who walked around basically on two legs. And they look like, a weary commuter carrying a heavy briefcase, lugging it along. No one wanted to hear it. Then there was the guy who discovered the larger Pacific striped octopus, an octopus species, gorgeous species that not only did not, just meet to mate and cannibalize its mate, but they mate beak to beak and appeared to have long-lasting relationships with their mates. His stuff wasn't even published. But now there's a huge appetite, not just for the cool merch and the beautiful art and the fantastic photographs and neat tattoos, but the media jumps right on any news about octopuses. And I think that Octonation had a great deal to do with ushering in what I call the golden age of octopus research.
You're proving your point right now with the larger Pacific striped octopus, because I Googled it out of curiosity to see what it looks like. And the third result is a Reddit community of people who sculpt with polymer clay. And there is an amazing sculpture of larger Pacific octopuses playing with teacups and a tea set and holding pearls and spoons and oyster shells. So the fact that an octopus that was in complete obscurity not long ago is now being featured in art projects in an art community that isn't even about octopuses is just proving your point.
So I'm like good friends with her, and like a lot of these artists, like I said, they get discovered in Octonation, and they have patrons for good, because there's so many people that want more octopus things, the capitalism, baby. They want like their house, they want things, and so to showcase them is great, because I know that it leads to them being able to do what they love. And we had this conversation on another podcast with people asking, what can we do for the octopus? And my answer was just whatever's sustainable for you. If you're into memes, then, and that's how you want to educate, then by all means go into that. But don't do something that you think that you need to do, or become a part of some like activist group because you're like, well, I don't really know, or what. It's like, you have to do what's sustainable to you and what really lights you up, because if you're not lit up, it's going to come through. It always comes through, and it's not a sustainable thing. So if it is art, if it is like Jeff Day, he's on X and a lot of other platforms. His thing is like deep sea cephalopods, and he's the best and the brightest. He gives a lot of credit to these people like Mike Vicconi and all these researchers that are brilliant at IDing, and Jeff is right up there. A lot of these people like me had imposter syndrome around, I don't know, I don't have a degree in this isn't whatever. And yet we're studying it for 8 hours a day. Like on ourselves, we're reading all of the same literature that all of these people are reading. And there's a lot to be said around imposter syndrome in the science communication space, being like, am I the voice? Am I supposed to be doing this? And if it lights you up, the answer is yes.
Somebody said go from having imposter syndrome to being a trickster god. And I love that. Where it's just like, haha, I've infiltrated the ranks by proving my worth, that I've known this much all along. It's fantastic.
Sai, it seems like you almost have this kind of superpower of your openness when you come at these things. You were kind of available to see the octopuses you knew. I've never heard someone even describe a relationship with an animal, even one that they know very well. It's very rare to hear people describe that as knowing them rather than having a pet or something like that. In that openness, what are some of the personality traits that you saw in the octopuses that you've known? What makes them individuals and what makes them themselves?
Oh, great question. Well, in some aquaria, the names of the octopus reflect who they are. In Seattle Aquarium, they had one who was so shy they named her Emily Dickinson because she never came out from behind the filter. And there was another one they named Leisure Suit Larry because he'd put one arm on you and you'd peel that off, and then there'd be two arms and you'd peel them off, and then three arms would be on. And one another they called Lucretia McEvil because she constantly dismantled everything in the tank. And the octopuses that I knew when I first met Athena, Athena was named after the goddess of war, and she was feisty. And I was the first non-staff person that she really wanted to interact with, and she let me touch her head, which no one had ever done. And she turned white beneath my touch, which is the color of a relaxed octopus. But she was towards the end of her life, and I didn't get to know her very well. But Octavia, I did get to know from pretty much as soon as she showed up at the aquarium. And at first, she wanted nothing to do with me. She was she hadn't been waiting behind the scenes for a long time. She basically came from the wild, was for a while in a holding tank in, I think, British Columbia, and then got shipped FedEx to Boston. And she did not want me to hand her a fish. She didn't want any of the stuff. We kept trying to get her to come over, me and Wilson Menashe, and she wouldn't come and wouldn't come and wouldn't come. And then later that day, we handed her a fish on a grabber, and she grabbed the fish, ignored the fish, grabbed the grabber, ignored the grabber, and then pulled me.
Huh.
And I wasn't frightened, but I didn't know quite what she was doing. I felt, though, that she was testing me, that she was inquisitive, that it wasn't aggressive. And I was really glad that I understood correctly, that I did not read any aggression, because, they're venomous animals and they're extremely strong. And a single 3.5-inch sucker can lift 35 pounds, and there's 200 of them on each of a giant Pacific octopus's arm. So, if they wanted, they could hurt you, but they don't want to hurt you. They're just interested. So she liked to play games. And the next time I saw her, I came with a group of my friends from the radio show Living on Earth. And there was a producer, and there was a host, Steve Kerwood, and there was the sound guy, and Bill was there, and Wilson was there. And she came right over. We had a bucket of fish, and we were feeding her fish, and we were lost in the sensation of petting her and feeling her and watching her change color. And then we thought, let's give her another fish. And we're like, where's the bucket? Well, she'd stolen the bucket out from under us. We didn't even know. And there were like 5 people with our hands touching the animal, watching the animal. And she had outsmarted us all. And where was the bucket? She was holding it in her interbrachial web. She didn't even eat the fish. She was just playing with the bucket. And I think she was messing with our heads. She was that kind of gal. And we loved to play with stuff together and solve puzzles together. And we loved to enjoy, gentle touch. She would let me pet her, and then she would be sucking on me. And she was a dear, good friend. And at the end of her life, I found out just how much I meant to her. Because at that point, she was old, she was sick, she had laid her eggs, she had guarded them assiduously for, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, 10 months. Normally they would have hatched if they were fertile, but they weren't, and she didn't know that. And her eggs were falling apart, and she was falling apart. And they moved her behind the scenes, and I came in to say goodbye. And this animal, because she had been in her den guarding her eggs, she and I had not played together for 10 months. We'd been friends for a long time, but 10 months to an animal who only lives 3 to 5 years is decades. So this was a friend who essentially hadn't seen me for decades. And I didn't know that she would recognize me or that she would care if she did. And we opened the lid of the tank, and she was old and sick and dying, but she came to the top of that tank. It was actually a barrel. And we handed her a fish and she just threw it away. She came to the top to look into my eyes and into Wilson's and to touch us one last time. And she did not have to do that. There was nothing in it for her except our company. And I will remember that to my dying day. It was one of the most moving things that has ever happened to me. Franz de Waal, whose death I learned of today, he wrote a number of beautiful books, and one of them was called Mama's Last Hug, and it was about animal emotions, and it began with the story of a very old chimpanzee who was on her death nest, and an old human friend who hadn't seen her in years came to say goodbye to her in the zoo. And there's video of this. Mama's face lights up in a big smile. She envelops her friend in her arms. She's so glad to see him. And that happened to me with an octopus, an animal, an invertebrate that is so unlike us. Many people consider them aliens. And yet, she was certainly capable of that kind of caring and meant so much to me.
That's amazing. I got goosebumps hearing that story. That's just because they are so different from us, and it really makes you realize that even with all of their differences and how we don't even know fully how they perceive the world, because one of the things is like humans have kind of a centralized brain in our heads, but octopuses, they have the majority of their nervous system in their arms, which can act independently. So their perception of the world is just completely different. And we know some things and we certainly don't know others. And even with all of that difference, there is still that connection there of shared experience and emotion, I would say.
Absolutely. And emotion and intellect and memories, all of these things have adaptive value. And the idea that humans should come up with this de novo is ridiculous. It helps you survive. And we blind ourselves to so much in this world when we think that humans are the only ones to possess this.
The story of the chimpanzees is phenomenal, but like that's our closest living ancestor. So it's phenomenal, but not to downplay it, unsurprising in a way. And like I looked it up and we diverged from chimps between 13 and 5 million years ago. And an octopus we diverged from at a point where neither of us had eyes, where eyes appeared independently, and where 500 million years, I mean, I can hardly comprehend 10,000 years, but 500 million years is so beyond our reasoning, to the thought that something that can make sense of us and that we can make sense of them being separated by that level of deep time. It's awe-inspiring.
Yeah, you can get a blood transfusion from a chimp, and yet an octopus has blue blood coursing through its three hearts that is copper-based instead of iron-based. That's how different we are.
It's an alien encounter. I mean, like not literally, obviously, we're creatures of Earth, but I feel like it's as close as you can get to an alien encounter with a fellow Earthling, you know?
And when you think too of, how we humans make these huge divisions between even fellow humans, this person is the wrong religion, or this person is, oh, they're a different race, or, this person is autistic, or that, I can't possibly be friends with them. I can't understand them. That seems crazy when you have had a dear friend who is an octopus.
I think that's another reason why I was so drawn to them, because growing up in San Antonio, Texas, and then, coming out after being afraid to tell anybody about, what I was feeling or what I was going through, I just remember, oh, there's so many people that want to tell the story of who I am and what I represent. And I was like listening to them being like, oh, well, gay people are this, or they do that, or this, it's not right, or this, whatever. And I'm listening to people kind of like describe who I think I am. And when I saw the octopus, I saw the same thing that was happening in the media with, them saying octopuses are 8-armed underwater bullies. Octopuses are, and I just saw headline after headline, and I would see it and I'd be like, they can't even speak for themselves. Like, and that was a connection that I felt young, in my teens, and then later as I was, when people would ask me what your favorite animal is, and I didn't really figure out until later on in life, like my profound connection to the octopus is the fact that they've spent their whole entire, even Aristotle said the octopus was a dumb creature for it'll approach a man's hand when lowered in the water when it was just exhibiting curiosity. And so there was just all these things where I was like, yeah, this is it. This is going to be my thing, my animal. And then just going on the journey of discovering all these different species. And I feel like every other day, it's 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 so remarkable just finding creatures that are perfectly adapted, like the Antarctic octopus that has antifreeze proteins in its skin and allow it to survive in like sub-zero
Yeah,
temperatures.
I was researching
Yeah.
one of the Antarctic species and finding out how they studied the genome of two distinct populations to track how the ice shelf changed over hundreds of thousands of years. So
Hmm.
it's like, what?
Yeah.
Like the idea of applying nature to something that seemingly abstract, that you can look at an octopus genome and be like, yeah, this ice shelf existed at this point in prehistory because these octopuses are that different from each other. It's like it's so cool. That technology would be unheard of a century ago, and now that we're diving into like the deep genomes and stuff, like what will we know about an octopus in 10 years, in 100 years? Like it's so we're just
And you see how they
making
go
discoveries
viral.
left and right.
Like the species that goes, I think, viral the most as a result of like how lethal they are is the blue ringed octopus. And you
Mhm.
see, there's so many videos of people playing with them and they're on their hands.
Uh-huh.
And there's so many people that are just like, you could have died because, tetrodotoxin is like 1,000 times more lethal than cyanide. And yet they don't typically bite. I'm not saying to go out there and play with a blue ringed octopus. Like, do not do that. But when it all comes
Good
down to it,
disclaimer.
when I think of these creatures, I think of like they don't typically like there are some species that are really bitey. I've learned from some researchers like the ruby octopus. They're very well. Kurt Onthink said they're bitey because they kind of like almost like a dog, like teething you. The ruby octopus will kind of do that. But the blue-ringed octopus typically won't waste its energy. It'll bite into things that it know that it can eat because its brain wraps around its esophagus like a donut. So oftentimes it doesn't make sense to bite something that they're like, I can't, like, I'm not going to be able to turn this into a delicious smoothie and ingest it. So I'll just probably, they do this defense mechanism. It's like dematic behavior. Well, their rings kind of like, turn different colors. And then they have this thing called protein behavior where it's just like they'll cling on to you. I don't know if you've seen, you probably have because you guys are the internet. Um, like quite literally, we're the internet here. They'll cling on human bodies. You've seen this in My Octopus Teacher. You've seen this in Hawaii when they put, octopuses on girls' butts for marketing photos, which I don't think they should be doing that at all. But there's this self-defense mechanism that they do because they've learned that if they attach all of their suckers onto something, they can't be eaten. The mouth can't get
Huh.
their arms or whatever. And so it's a self-defense mechanism that they do. And then when they feel like the coast is clear, they'll let go with one fell swoop and then they'll blast ink and blast off. But a lot of times people think when they're attached to people, like you just see it all the time. They're like, "Oh my gosh, this octopus likes this person." I'm like, "No, it's scared for its life. Like it is exhibiting a behavior that is like, please don't eat me." And so there's just all these things that we try to course correct in Octonation. We educate when we can. Like when you see an octopus in the water column floating, it oftentimes was put there by a dive master or something
Hmm.
who. So we've just learned things over the past 9 years and have developed ethics as we move on and kind of learn things. But it's just been really fun, and I can't wait to see what comes of it. And also just with this book, this full circle moment with my mentor, Cy Montgomery, having read her book in 2015 and inspiring me to create Octonation, to be in a book with her is a dream come true. And so this book also just represents what's possible when if you read a book or you're inspired by something, following through with that inspiration and working past your imposter syndrome to believe that you can affect change too, because I don't know. I feel like we're a great example of that. Still working through it, But now we have a great board. Chelsea Bennis as our scientific advisor. We have a brilliant creative director. As you know, you've seen our illustrations of anatomically correct octopus species stickers. And it grows every single day. So I don't really look at this, but seeing how many celebrities follow you. And my friend was like, "Did you know that Busta Rhymes follows Octonation?" I'm like, "I had no idea." Like, he's like, "Yeah." He's just
The
like,
collaboration happening.
Yeah,
That's what I want to know.
Kate Hudson, Michael B. Jordan, Busta Rhymes.
You got to tell me how to figure out your celebrity
Yeah,
followers.
Andrew
I'm curious.
Huberman. Like, there's just so many different people that champion and that are paying attention now to the octopus. And I think with this new on Earth Day, I mean, just wait. This is the highest quality footage we've ever seen of these creatures doing behaviors that
We wish we
Yeah, I
could all
watched-
be together to watch it, you know?
Oh,
What do
watch
you-
party. That
I'm-
would be amazing.
I'm
know.
down for a watch party.
Oh,
Yeah.
God,
Got to be a way to coordinate that.
Yeah.
that would be
If not
such
on
a
Earth Day and
blast.
around it.
Oh,
Yeah, I watched Secret of the Whales. I'm, a little bit of Secret to the Elephants. So I'm very excited for Secret to the Octopus.
James
yeah,
Cameron.
we're so lucky too, man.
And Paul Rudd.
National
That's a fun one.
Geographic.
We
Oh
say
my
that
God.
James Cameron took a break from filming the most expensive film in history, Avatar, to film our real life avatars in our ocean. And we're really, really excited to see just the behaviors because they did something really unique with rebreathers and spending a lot of time underwater to see behaviors that people have never seen before. And so I'm really excited to see that footage.
Well, I think that's about all the time we have. The book is Secrets of the Octopus. It's beautifully illustrated, it's beautifully written, and there's some great fact files in it as well. Cy and Warren, thank you so much for coming on here today.
It was great. Oh, what fun. Gosh, I feel like we were with kindred spirits.
I know. I want to keep talking for 3 more hours. I'm just like, I have so many more things that we just so much we could dive into. But
We'll have you on for your next book.
Yes, more species for sure.
So that's our show. Thanks for listening. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so at patreon.com/wildgreenmemes. That's memes with an M. We'll send you cool things in the mail every month. And for some episodes, we put the names of patrons at the end as an additional thank you. Until next time, I'm Rhett.
I'm Curtis.
I'm Io.
I'm Cy.
And I'm Warren.
And happy Year of the Raccoon.